Hello and welcome to another episode of Frames Team. Today I'm going to talk about what's going to happen next with Nikon. Very importantly, the Nikon Z6III. Let me begin with the most important thing. Who is it for? This has to be an all-rounder camera, optimized for almost everything. May not be specialized for wildlife because for wildlife, Z9 and Z8 will be leading the pack. But apart from wildlife, if you consider sports, if you consider wedding, if you consider events photography broadly, portraiture, studio photography, street photography, this has to be the Nikon camera that's relevant for everyone equally. And that's how difficult this job is. And so in a way, I understand that if Nikon takes a bit more time to get to the specifications of the Nikon Z6III compared to any other camera, because a ZF, at the end of the day, you know what the brief is. The Z6III could be difficult because it is that crucial for Nikon. Okay, so you've said that they have taken time. Nikon have taken time to come up with the Z6III. In fact, we do not have any real conversation coming from Nikon on the Z6III. So, but we know it's going to be there. So what's the reason that they're taking time? One reason is how important this camera is. Of course, like I said, they have to be really sure about what they make out of this Z6III. But at the same time, this is crucial for them because this is that one camera that is going to be decisive in Nikon regaining market share. That does not mean they need to just fight the Sony A7 IV, which is 2 years old, and the Canon R6 II, which is more than a year old now. They have to be ready with a camera that can fight Sony's and Canon's next iteration of the A7 Mark IV, which is the A7 V, and possibly the Canon R6 Mark III. How? And I think the key is in three things: speed, improvements made for specifically studio shooting, and third, great video features. These are the three broad buckets within which the Nikon Z6III has to improve upon whatever they have offered so far within that price bracket, which I think is going to be a $2,500 price bracket. I don't think it's going to be a $2,000 camera. I think it's going to be between 24 to 2600 US dollars. Let's begin with speed. There are two things that impact speed. First is the processor, and the XP7 processors now today is almost 2 years old. Surprising how fast the 2 years went by, but it's almost 2 years old now. At this stage, I think Nikon is likely to definitely add the XP7 processor to the Z6III, but I think with a tweak, with an iteration, with some improvement, I think we are going to see some capacity increase in the same XP7 processor, and that's going to unlock new capabilities for the Nikon Z6III. But that's one part of the speed story. The second part of the speed story is the sensor, and to be honest, it is with the Z9 that sensor became a big story in the camera market again, because that sensor can read so fast. They can read the data so fast off the sensor. The Z8 and the Z9 did not require a mechanical shutter, so that changed the game. And I think if today we're talking about global shutter, that's because the push, really the nudge, actually came from the Nikon Z9, and people will say, oh, it is a Sony A7 A9 III that did it. Not true. The truth is that the first shutterless camera, professional camera in the world, is the Z9, followed up with the Z8, both below $6,000 but I digress. The important point is the sensor is going to be critical. I don't think it's going to be a camera without shutter. I think Nikon definitely should use shutter in this camera and try and maximize image quality output, which means 26.3 and plus bit color and very, very high dynamic range. Maximize dynamic range, maximize color depth. In order to do that, take the help of the mechanical shutter, but ensure that the sensor on its own is still a fast reading sensor. So I'm saying it's going to be a fast sensor, not as fast as the Z9 or the Z8, but fast enough, faster than most cameras in this price bracket, faster than the Canon R6 Mark II's 24 megapixel sensor, much faster than the 33 megapixel sensor that you see in the Sony A7 IV. If we get that, I have to say we are looking at a great camera. At this point, the sensor for the Z6III is its biggest mystery. That's what people are trying to figure out. Is it going to be a high megapixel camera? Is it going to be a low megapixel camera? High in this context is anything close to 40 is high for Z6 III. Is it going to be a 24 megapixel camera? Nikon said at some point, a couple of years, 3 years back almost, after launching the Z6 II, that was going to be Nikon's last full frame 24 megapixel camera. But since then, we have seen the ZF. So I think that comment from Nikon holds any ground anymore. Nikon have, I mean, clearly the reality is different now. But I think it's difficult for Nikon to be below 33 megapixels, something that you see on the Sony A7 IV. But getting close to 40 megapixels is also going to be difficult for multiple reasons. I'm not going to get into the details of that. So I think it's probably going to be the same Sony sensor, the 33 megapixel sensor, but optimized for much higher speed. This body should do very well with the, now as a great studio camera, I think Nikon should maintain the fantastic top screen that you see in most Nikon Z cameras, especially the full frame bodies. I just want to see more information on the top screen than what is shown on the Z6 II and the Z7 II. But I am not expecting much change, but that remains a wish. Also, I would expect a 1/500th of a second sync speed, and that'll be a game changer for a $2,500 USD camera. I really think Nikon should push for that, and that's going to be a huge thing for most people. And we're going to see a lot of people coming into Nikon just because of higher flash sync. Again, more customizable buttons, that's going to be very important. I think we must remember that Nikon bodies do not have a rotatable third wheel. This is just a four-way pad, but it doesn't have a wheel. If you look at what Sony has done in the recent bodies, is that they have 4 customizable wheels. Okay, Canon has 3 customizable wheels. The Sony wheel here is also a 4-way pad or button where each direction can be mapped to a function, which means you have 4 functions set to the 4 direction pads. Each direction will mean something, and then you can scroll through different functions because now it's a wheel. So imagine the customizability on a Sony. I think a Sony is a far more customizable. Most Sonys today are far more customizable than most Nikons. Yes, ergonomically Nikon is ahead, but when it comes to customizability, I think Sony simply has much more buttons, and I think Nikon can do it. All they have to do is allow, for example, the zoom in and zoom out button to be customizable. Allow the display button is already customizable. Allow the delete button to be customizable, and let the Nikon Z6 III be that camera that changes things for the better now after a long time. And so keep what's great traditionally on the Nikon bodies in terms of ergonomics and design philosophy, but take the cue from Sony, take the cue from Nikon and Fuji. The other thing when it comes to making it a great studio camera is actually a 4-way tilt screen. I think when you mount a camera on a tripod, and it can be at any angle, you can just decide to keep the camera very low, or you can raise it high. It can be sideways. You can just, you just want to be able to interact with the camera any way you want to. So I think the A7R5 screen on the Nikon Z6 III is going to be great. I'm not sure if we're going to get it, but I think there's been enough conversation even in the Nikon community that saying that you all like that screen. Now let's talk about video. The real benchmark for video in this category, in this price category, is actually the Panasonic S5 II and the XH2S. Now, so what am I expecting? What am I expecting from this camera in terms of video? I am expecting 1080 at 240 frames per second. Seriously, 1080 at 240 frames per second is going to be a big deal. And now these are the things that makes the camera different. These are the things that makes the camera a winning proposition. I tell you, the screen from the Sony A7R5 or something like that makes it intuitive, and it makes it equally, like, it just, the divide between videographers wanting a flip screen and photographers wanting a tilt screen, that divide needs to be resolved. Once you resolve it, we'll get a whole bunch of people coming in. Okay, once you add more customizable buttons, whole bunch of people will come in. Once you have much better sync speed beyond 1/200th of a second, you'll invite a bunch of people to the Nikon ecosystem. And everyone is going to be a winner. Add that 240 frames per second at 1080p. Okay, a big deal. Many want better slow motion capabilities, and they don't necessarily need 4K. At times, 1080 is still fine in today's day and age. You can probably upscale it in software. 4K 60 without crop. Canon R6 II has already mostly done it. I think the Nikon Z6II should do it and do it better. 4K 60 without crop. Of course, no record time limit. Also, the other thing is that, look at 4K 120 with some crop. Push the barrier. Look at giving us 4K 120, maybe with a crop. I think it should be easy because the Z8 can already do 8 megapixel burst at 120 FPS, right? Which means that's basically what 4K file is, 8 megapixels. So 4K 120 without crop is possible, because within the Z8 and the Z9, you're crunching, you're taking the whole load of 46 megapixel worth of information and bringing it down to 4K, and then doing it at 120 frames per second. So if this sensor, the new Z6III sensor, is going to be anything less than 46, 45 megapixels, you're going to handle less data. So I think it's a matter of choice. 4K 120, at least with a bit of crop, is definitely possible. Okay. Now, one very important thing, I think this camera should definitely go for 6K. 6K 50, 6K 60 should be easy, and they should do it. Nikon right now doesn't have a 6K camera. 8K is impractical for most people. Look at what Canon R3 is doing as an output to Ninja V Plus, but they're doing 6K. And Fuji is doing it, 65 and XH2. And I think those cameras set the precedence, and I think we should definitely have that for the people that need it from the Z6III. 6K 60, 6K, if not at least 6K 30. Okay. It should definitely have a full-size HDMI port. The Nikon Z6II had I think not the smallest one, but the mid-sized HDMI port. I don't think we should have that. I think Nikon should just try and sort of streamline it. The A7 IV, take the best examples as the benchmark. The Canon R6II has a micro HDMI. That's not a benchmark. The Sony A7 IV has a full-size HDMI. That's the benchmark. Now, of course, 10-bit 422, obviously with N-Log, 1 or 2 dedicated custom buttons for video features, that'll be great. Okay. Now, in terms of video features, I want a few more things, and I think it's time for Nikon to get into it if they're taking video seriously. Once you take video seriously, you have to talk the language of the filmmakers. So yes, anamorphic de-squeeze, important. False colors, important. Better IBIS than even the ZF, and an IBIS mechanism that locks. Let me tell you, the ZF has crazy IBIS. Even if you try to stabilize handhold a video at 85 mm focal length or more than 100 mm focal length, the ZF can do it so smoothly. You don't know that it's not stabilized by some external mechanism. It is that good. But I think ZF, because of the body size, Nikon still had to make some compromises, and they could not offer a locking mechanism for the IBIS system. In this case, I think they should push the barrier further. If ZF can give you 8 stops in photo, I think the Z60 should give you 8 stops even in video, and then with a locking mechanism. Now, so basically, be the best within the price segment. You already have the processing power. I'm sure you're figuring out the sensor. Be the best. These are my list of expectations. I think it sounds tall, but even if this camera is 26 and 50 US dollars, it's fine, because after 6 months you're going to go probably give a $200-$250 off anyway. So the important thing is to get the camera right and put the best foot forward, and I'm pretty sure you guys definitely look forward to the Z6III. I think it's going to be a fantastic camera, especially because of the time that Nikon has taken, and when they're so quiet, they usually pull out something great. Now, before I close this discussion, I'd like to say that if all this is not found on the Z6III, it will be a huge opportunity loss for Nikon to make a decisive volume gain in the mirrorless culture. See, it's also a culture, not just a market. It's a mind share, not just market share. Okay, so Nikon needs a win here, a massive, decisive win. And it's not necessarily a technology win, it's a product value mix win. It's that combination. What are you providing the market? At what price? Nikon has a capability, they need to decide to go for the big win. Among the prosumers, they need it. Among the beginners, they need this Z6III. And among the people who are flirting with the idea of getting into a Nikon, this is the camera. Okay, the Z6III along with a solid APS-C Z50 Mark II in 2024. I think that's what we are expecting from Nikon in 2024. A solid upgrade to the Z50 Mark II, a solid upgrade to the Z50 Mark II and the Z6III. And this should be done before 6 months are over in the calendar year in 2024. That will be game changer for Nikon. The Sony a7 IV and Canon R6 II are fabulous cameras. And in 2023, if you want to buy a Nikon camera that competes with them, you actually have nothing that truly competes with them on the market right now from Nikon. The Z6 II at this point is good, but it's old. The ZF is great, but has a non-traditional body, which is not for everyone. So enter the Nikon Z6III. It's actually the most anticipated camera for more than a year. I remember earlier this year when I ran a poll, almost more than 50% wanted a Z6III and not the Z8. Even though that I ran the poll when the Z8 announcement had just happened. I can see so many people gravitating towards Nikon, selling their Fuji, selling their Canon, selling their Sony, getting out of those systems and buying into Nikon because of ZF. I have already seen that. Okay, I see that in comment section. I know people who are doing it, and that's just going to become a tenfold of a trend if Nikon gets a Z6III right. And I can see so many of them will leave Canon and Sony and get into Nikon just because of the Z6III. But what's a rationale for that? Because, well, at this moment, Nikon ecosystem is one of the best, one of the most flexible. You have almost 50 great Z mount lenses, and then you have Tamron, Sigma, Viltrox making autofocus lenses for the Z mount. Soon, I'm sure Samyang is going to start making lenses for the Nikon Z mount. So, huge, affordable, and high quality lens lineup is available. No problem at all. What else? Well, Nikon color science is among the best. The dynamic range is among the best. Okay. The ergonomics are among the best. Canon cameras don't have very good dynamic range yet. On the Sony side, you lose dynamic range while working on the raw file trying to fix colors. You have to accept it. And then you start doing some editing after fixing colors. And after doing that baseline fixing of colors, you have lost a bit of dynamic range. Okay. Sony, they don't do IBIS well. IBIS is actually a compromise. I mean, no matter how they, what kind of language they use, what new name they give to cropping, okay, because the mount is small, they don't have enough space for the sensor to move around flexibly and do good IBIS. So Nikon is Sony is you can say limited in the capability to do that. For example, look at the lenses. Many of the lenses suffer from focus breathing, although that's not because of the mount. That's because Sony doesn't want to make lenses that are long. Because if you want to do good close focusing, the focusing element needs to go retract backward. So that requires the lens to be longer in size, and Sony wants to keep it tight, keep it small. But yes, those lenses do focus breathe, and Sony's solution is cropping again, right? So, which means they have a 50 mm lens that's actually 45 mm lens. They have a 600 mm lens that's actually like a 500 mm lens. On the Nikon mount, you have none of those problems. Unlike Sony, Nikon offers you constant firmware updates. Look at the A1 owners. I mean, they're really begging for firmware updates. It's crazy. It's a very expensive camera, $6,000 without even a grip. Ask a Z9 owner. His experience is going to be completely different. For him, he owns Z9 Mark III, and that's how much the Z9 has grown in the last 2 years. Unlike Canon, you don't have to compete, you don't have to compromise on lenses or go bankrupt. Just have to buy 5 lenses, right? Those are very, very expensive, great lenses, but very, very expensive lenses. The Nikon 1.8 primes are some of the best on the market. They're unparalleled value, honestly, when you look at the quality. No matter what Christopher Frost says, even if it doesn't include any Nikon lenses for his best of 2023 video, you know the Nikon lenses are one of the best in the market, on the market. So a lot rides on the Z6III. It's not only Nikon's fortunes, mind you, but also the consumer power and choice in the market. I think the way Z9 and Z8 really pushed Sony to launch the A9 Mark III, I think the Z6II can push the competitors to do a lot more for every one of us. I'm going to see you soon with another video. And if you liked what I've said today, subscribe. And if you want to know how to set up the ZF, I'm going to put the link below. If you want to know how the ZF compares with the XT5, I'm going to put a link below. If you're especially owner of Z8 and you have some flickering problem, like a blackout problem on your viewfinder despite owning a Z8 or a Z9, I have a solution. I'm going to put the link below. See you soon with another one.